Well, we are back here at the AnxietyRX Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Russell Kennedy, and today I want to talk about something called competing attachments and how they play a role in anxiety. Now, typically, competing attachment, if you look through the press, is about when someone's having an affair, when someone's cheating. So they have a competing attachment. They have their primary attachment, their primary person, and then there's somebody on the side piece or whatever they call, whatever the kids are calling it these days. I look at competing attachments in a different way, a more holistic way, a more general way. So a competing attachment could be that your girlfriend, if you're a boy, the gender dynamic is, I don't want to sort of get into this. Basically, this is just the example that I'm using. So say you're a male, you have a girlfriend, and she has a dog. And she's had the dog for 5 years, and you're starting a new relationship with her, and you feel threatened by the dog. You don't like the dog or whatever because of what the dog symbolizes. Now, the dog could be a jerk too. I'm not saying that dogs aren't jerks sometimes, but I'm talking about a competing attachment is any attachment that competes with your attachment to the person. So it could be you have a spouse and that spouse has kids from a different relationship. Those kids are competing attachments with you. And this is where blended families come into real anxiety because the person kind of in the middle, say the mother of two daughters, gets involved with a man, and the man doesn't have any real direct connection to the daughters, but the daughters are competing for the woman's attention. And this is the cause of a lot of anxiety in relationships, even subconsciously. And that's why I wanted to address it as a competing relationship so that you can see in your life if you feel threatened by another relationship, and it can be just about anything, to see it as a competing attachment, to be able to label it as such, and just to see that it's normal to be threatened by a competing attachment. When we grow up with trauma, we often grow up with this idea that love is finite. So the amount of love given to one sibling isn't available for the others. And if there's a traumatic dynamic in the family and it's been handed down from generations, there are these dysfunctional dynamics where there's a favorite child or someone is really favored or someone's really rejected in the family. So there's these competing attachments that we have, and we have to be aware of how they impact us. So sometimes when Cynthia and I are watching Netflix at night and Michael, her son Michael, comes in, we shut everything down to talk to him. And most of the time it's fine. But sometimes if I've had a particularly bad day or whatever, I get irritated. It's like, why do we have to shut off our show just because he walks in the room? Just because he walks in the room, we have to shut everything off. Now, I have no problem with it, really. It doesn't really bother me, but it comes back to a place in my own childhood where I was competing with my father, who was severely mentally ill, and my brother, who, when he was younger, had quite a few orthopedic injuries. So the way it worked when I was young is my brother got born with club feet. So he had a lot of orthopedic surgeries and complications and that kind of thing. So my mother put a lot of energy into my younger brother. And my dad was crazy and depressed and psychotic and all those things that he was. So my mother had to pay attention to him when he would go off the rails. So as a result, for me, I kind of withdrew. I kind of withdrew from attachments because, for one, I didn't feel love was safe because dealing with my father, every once in a while, he would go crazy and my love for him would disappear because he was crazy. And I would feel like it was unsafe to love because to see someone you love just completely withdraw from you and go psychotic was very difficult for a child and a teenager and a young adult male. So for me, I learned from my dad that love wasn't safe to trust. On top of that, my mother had a competing attachment with my brother because all siblings are competing attachment for their parents. It just works that way. A friend of mine is a twin, and there is no greater competing attachment than a twin, because basically it's kind of like, in the way, it's sort of the same person, same age, in a way, competing for the attention of the mother or the father. So the reason I wanted to do this episode today, and it'll probably be fairly short, is just to show you to be really aware of what are the competing attachments in your life. Are you in a blended family? Do you have like 4 siblings and you are either the favorite one or the not favorite one or whatever? How do these competing attachments, these other people, sometimes animals, how do they affect you? Because I know when my wife's son comes in, when we're watching a movie and we stop everything, there is this kind of like, this frustration in my chest. And it's in the same area in my solar plexus area as my alarm is. So it's really interesting to see how this re-triggers my old feeling of not being important enough, being sidelined for someone else who has a more urgent problem or is more important. In my little child mind that I still have in my head from my childhood, I look at this as a competing attachment, and I go back to it and I age regress, which is another thing I wanted to say, is that often we will go back to a time in our lives that was stressful. So when we're faced with a competing attachment, and this is where I sort of bring in someone who's maybe cheating on you, right? There is this competing attachment. It's going to take you back to a place where you felt really angry, alone, scared, whatever. So it's important to see where this comes from, that it's not just triggering your anxiety or your angst or your alarm out of the blue. There is a reason why you feel this alarm in your system when another person enters your atmosphere and connects with someone that you are also connected with. So it's just really important to be aware of, this puppy is a competing attachment. This son is a competing attachment. This other person is a competing attachment. And when you find that, because it makes you feel alone, that's when you need to connect with yourself. That's what I wrote about in the book. That's what I write about in MBRX, my mind-body prescription for permanent anxiety healing that I have online. It's really about connecting with yourself. So the more solid you can create this connection with yourself, the less threatened you are by competing attachments. The more connected you are to yourself, and the more you practice this connection with yourself, you can be holistically attached to whatever person you're attached to, and not begrudge that person's attachment to something else, a person, a child, a dog, a parent, whatever it is. But we get really triggered, and I hear about this a lot for women who have a partner, a male partner, who's still attached to his mother, very attached to his mother. It's a real threat for people when that person that you're involved with is still really attached to the parent in a codependent way. If your partner is attached to their parent in a appropriate, attached, secure manner, people don't tend to get too upset about that. But it's when the attachment is abnormal, or when you feel that they would pick the parent over you, or the child over you, or the other person over you, that's when it brings us into this real alarming state of feeling like our attachment to this person isn't secure. It could be taken away at any moment. Someone else could usurp my attachment to this person. And the more we're aware of that, and the more we initially see it and are able to connect with ourselves, like go in, put your hand on your chest, connect with yourself. And in a way, you're sort of saying, I don't need the connection so much. I want the connection with the other person, of course, but I'm not codependent with that other person. Love is not finite. The love that they give to their dog, their son, their parent, whatever, is not a threat to me. Now, again, that gets challenged if they have an attachment that is codependent, that is dysfunctional. And all the more reason for you to understand, hey, I'm being triggered. This is a competing attachment. And again, competing attachment, if you look at it, if you Google it or whatever, it's always assuming that someone's cheating. So there's two different people for one person. And that's the competing attachment. It's more broad than that. It's more broad than that. It can be an animal. It could be anything. It could be, I'm joking here, but it could be golf. I hear a lot of golf widows, right? Like women who lose their husbands to golf for 6 hours at a time. Golf would be a competing attachment. And what I'm trying to say is try to really see in your life where your competing attachments are. Because I don't think there's anybody who doesn't have competing attachments, but just see where they are and see if you can become more objectively observational. If you can see your competing attachments in awareness, in compassionate awareness for yourself first, connect with yourself first so that you're attached to yourself. You're securely attached to yourself. Now, I know this is easier said than done. It's not like Dr. Kennedy's out there going, oh, you have to love yourself. You have to feel connected to yourself. Yeah, you do. But it's just awareness. It's just like being really aware of when you get threatened. And can you use the antidote to that angst from competing attachment to connect with yourself, to do things for yourself, to be the partner, parent, whatever to yourself that you so badly need while you're being triggered by another competing attachment. And it's understanding that when we feel alarmed, there is a reason for that. And look to your relationships as to why you're feeling alarmed. Mostly, it's your relationship to yourself that isn't strong enough, that's allowing your nervous system to just go nuts, to go crazy, because you don't feel connected to someone else. And then on top of that, the person that you rely on most for your soothing, for your connection, for your ability to feel warm and attached to someone else is also, they are attached to someone else. And we see that as a threat. And it's really not a threat if we can stay connected and attached to ourselves. And again, I'm realizing that sounds very Pollyanna, very woo-woo, very, oh, you need to be attached to yourself, but you do need to be attached to yourself. That's what MBRX is about. That's what my book is about. That's what both of my books are about, is the more connected you are to yourself, the more securely attached you are to yourself and to the child in you, the less these competing attachments will pull you away from yourself and pull you into alarm. So it's really all about awareness. It's really about seeing yourself as the center of your universe with connections to other people that can come and go. Sometimes we feel really connected to our partner. Sometimes we don't. And that's okay. No one is 100% securely attached to another person all the time. It doesn't work that way. But we really have to understand that we have to make our intention to be as connected and securely attached to ourselves as possible. And that's what my books are about. That's what my program is about. And that's what healed my anxiety. And that's what will heal your anxiety and alarm as well. So it's a short one this week. Be aware of your competing attachments. Be able to label them. And when you're able to label them, they become less threatening. They become less of the sort of the dark monster. When you see what's happening, you can go, oh, this is what's happening. This is what Dr. Kennedy said. Like, oh, I'm being threatened by this competing attachment. Now, can I just turn that angst into connection with myself? And it takes practice. It really does take practice. It's not something that, you'll get a competing attachment and all of a sudden you'll just be able to connect with yourself and you're fine. It doesn't work that way. It's practice. It's awareness. It's seeing it. Because when you see it, you don't have to be it. When you see that you have a choice, when you see how things are working in your environment and how unconscious you were of it before. Like I said, I have people that they get really upset about their partner's attachment to their pet, their animal. And it's not about that. It's not about their attachment to the pet or the animal. It's the fact that we feel that the love that they're giving to their pet isn't available to us. And that's a childhood issue. That's a childhood wound. And that's something that we can we can turn around and become more attached to ourselves. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next time.